Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. I am grateful. Mindspeak returns on the 30th of May with Stephen Jennings. That's Saturday, the 30th of May. Stephen Jennings, I'll put up a photo. I sort of met with him yesterday. And I knew Stephen, we both worked at Credit Suisse First Boston when I first started out in my career. And then Stephen went to Moscow in 1998. I actually reminded him. I went to visit him and he threw a massive party on a boat. And now, of course, he's the promoter and the man behind Tattoo City. And Tattoo City is just one piece of the pie, because he's also got similar projects in Lumumbashi, in Accra, in Abuja. And he's got a great story to tell. And you can imagine, spanning Russia, global markets, the frontier, his experiences of tattoo, which have been in the press quite a lot lately. So I'm looking forward to that. I thank Dave Govender of Dow Chemical for a lively evening last night at the Caramel Restaurant, which of course was written about by Jeffrey Gettleman in the New York Times, but it was very enjoyable. The thing was, I left the office at about 5:45. And there was a massive deluge of rain. And, I actually got there at 7:45, and my phone went dead, so I couldn't even correspond. Fortunately, Dave was there, and I'm grateful. Home thoughts. The little one, Hannah, who's so delightful, made my morning this morning. She's popped up at 4:45 and snuggled into bed, and I spent sort of 10 minutes in that half sleep. Sort of frame of mind, my arm around my daughter. She's grown tall, and she called me yesterday from her mother's phone and says very proudly, Dad, I received a commendation. And all evening I'd sort of pop up, but when I got back in the early morning, I said, darling, what did you get? A coronation, a celebration, a categorization? I just started making words up, knowing full well then she could of course recount her marvellous triumph and her commendation to me again and again and again, and I was very happy to listen to her tell me about it. I'll put up a photograph of her. There was a very beautiful dining restaurant, Polana in Maputo. If you ever get a chance, do go to Maputo. It's really a pretty remarkable place, frankly. And the Polana as well. At 1,079 days ago, and as I was looking at her, I thought, oh my goodness, she's grown up. Let me leave you with two comments from Rainer Maria Rilke, whose tattoo is on, I can't remember which pop star's arm, and I was sort of quite taken aback, but let me give you these two quotes. The future enters into us in order to transform itself in us long before it happens. And I think that might be true. And then, you know, my stargazing habits. 1 billion stars go spinning through the night, glittering above your head. But in you is the presence that will be when all the stars are dead. Political reflections. Wars get bloodier as conflicts move into city streets. The number of people killed in wars has surged more than 60% in 2 years, even as the incidence of active conflicts declines, with combatants resorting to more extreme violence and battles being fought on city streets. Fatalities jumped to 180,000 in 2014 from 110,000 in 2012. The International Institute for Strategic Studies said today some 70,000 died in Syria alone. I mean, it's a debacle, isn't it, really? Where about 200,000 people have been killed since the conflict ignited in 2011. Incidences of warfare have declined from 63 in 2008 to 42 last year, with hostilities in countries including Colombia and the Philippines seemingly headed for resolution, and peacekeeping efforts faring well in sub-Saharan Africa, the IISS said. I'm not sure about that. At the same time, there's been an inexorable rise in the intensity of violence, led by jihadist wars across swathes of the Arab world, including Islamic State attacks on settlements such as Mosul and Tikrit. Warfare that takes place within cities, where increasingly warfare is happening, almost by definition invites prospects of greater concentrations of civilian casualties. This is the IISS. Syrian conflict has spawned 3.4 million refugees. Oh my goodness. 1.4 million of them fleeing the country in 2014. In 2013, more than 50 million people were displaced globally. Iraq produced the second highest tally of deaths at 18,000. South Sudan conflict ranking 5th on 12,000. Gang wars in Mexico accounted for the bulk of 15,000 deaths. Afghanistan accounted for 7,500 and the Ukraine conflict for some 4,500. And let me take you back to, I keep going on about Paul Virilio, but really his analysis of the type of period we're living in, this kind of thing, is phenomenal. And going back to that sentence I like, the revolutionary contingent attains its ideal form not in the place of production, but in the street, where for a moment it stops being a cog in the technical machine and itself becomes a motor machine of attack, in other words, a producer of speed. And I think that confirms wars get bloodier as conflicts move into city streets, and this plays to Virilio's point. And I wrote about this a few weeks ago. As we look around the world today, we can see a battle for the street, from the streets of Bujumbura to the streets of Baltimore. And another great book he wrote, Virilio, is called The Democracy of Emotion from the City of Panic. If you get a chance, do read what he's saying in it. And then he's famously said, images contaminate us like viruses. And it took me back to those images that ISIS puts out, the executioner, I don't know, whatever his name is, Jihadi John. And then the book, which I think is terrific, is Speed and Politics, and have a look at that because it's totally relevant about what's happening. Syrian city of Palmyra falls under control of ISIS. The Islamic State organization has now established almost complete control over the area, from Palmyra to the Syrian-Iraqi border and onwards to the Syrian-Jordanian frontier. The ancient city I always wanted to visit. Once a Silk Road hub and one of the cultural centers of the ancient world, that occupies a mythological status in Syria, is home to some of the most beautiful, well-preserved ruins of antiquity, including the Temple of Bel, built in the 1st century. And I concluded by saying that the barbarians are at the gate. I put up a photograph of Palmyra and it took me back to Ozymandias. I met a traveller from an antique land who said 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. The hand that mocked them, and the heart that fed, and on the pedestal these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Abuja, Cairo, Nairobi and Islamabad are among the 12 capital cities facing extreme terrorism risks. This is Verisk Maplecroft. Terrorist attacks pose an extreme risk to populations and business in the capital cities of 12 countries, included in the strategic markets of Egypt, Israel, Kenya, Nigeria and Pakistan. Total of 64 cities are categorized as extreme risk. Outside of Iraq, other capital cities rated extreme risk include Kabul, 13th most at risk, Mogadishu, 14th, Sana'a, 19th, Tripoli, 48th. This is an interesting point. An estimated 80% of global GDP is generated from cities. And I wrote about that when I was writing a bit about Dubai, global fluency and all of that kind of thing. Lagos, the only other sub-Saharan capital to appear in the extreme risk category, is Nairobi, 57th. Upsurge in attacks by the Islamist militant group Al-Shabaab. Over the reporting period, 184 people have been killed or wounded in Nairobi in 6 attacks. The impact of terrorism on the country's main commercial hubs of Nairobi and Mombasa, 82nd, has been particularly harmful to investor confidence. In addition, the tourist trade has declined by 7.4%. Declined by a lot more than that, I'm afraid. I'll put up a photograph, that photograph of Westgate I took when it was supposedly mattresses on fire or something, but it was 604 days ago. US media reports indicate that there is a possibility that US military ships and planes will attempt to enter the 12 nautical miles zone around the Chinese reefs near the Nansha Islands. This is a piece in Global Research, and then as I was going through it, I saw that the Chinese Navy warns US spy plane in disputed South China Sea. The Chinese Navy warned a US surveillance plane flying over artificial islands that Beijing is creating in the disputed South China Sea to leave the area 8 times, according to CNN, which was on board the flight on Wednesday. At one stage, after the American pilots responded by saying the plane was flying through international airspace, a Chinese radio operator said with exasperation, "This is the Chinese Navy, you go." The P-8A Poseidon, the US military's most advanced surveillance aircraft, flew at 15,000 feet at its lowest point. Some security experts worry about the risk of confrontation, especially after US officials said last week the Pentagon was considering sending military aircraft and ships to assert freedom of navigation around the Chinese-made islands. Footage taken by the P-8A Poseidon and aired by CNN showed a hive of construction and dredging activity on the new islands the plane flew over, as well as Chinese Navy ships nearby. CNN said it was the first time the Pentagon had declassified video of China's building activity and audio of challenges to a US aircraft. Now, my conclusions are this. Now that the Kiev pivot is on ice, and that's exemplified by the visit of the architect of that pivot, Victoria Nuland, to Poroshenko and to Russia, and John Kerry in that very sort of public sort of rapprochement that Lavrov said was wonderful. And I think they've reached a truce over there. And therefore, in these circumstances, China, which sort of fell off the radar a little bit, could get squeezed. And I think this is part of that squeezing process. I'll put up a photograph of a Navy P-8A Poseidon. It's sun and fun, lots of antennas on this thing, and take you back to an article I wrote on the 2nd of December 2013 when I was referring to the pivot to Asia bearing its fangs, and you're seeing the pivot bear its fangs again in the last few days. Euro got down to 110.80, and now it's at 111.45. Dollar index this morning was at 95.38, but it's surely slipped. Japanese yen 120.98, the Swissy this morning 0.9336, the pound 155.70, India rupee 63.685, South Korea 110.9436, the real around 3, the figure where it's been for a long time. Egyptian pound 763.01, South African rand 11.84.93. I'll put up a 3-month chart of the dollar index. I remain bullish. Of course, it's been a little bit tough because we've had a monster rally in the euro, which now might be unwinding. Monster rebound, but it's been such a dramatic fall. You're always in danger of such a thing happening. Many participants, going back to the dollar and the minutes that the Fed released, many participants, however, thought it unlikely that the data available in June would provide sufficient confirmation that the conditions for raising interest rates had been satisfied. Minutes after, therefore, people are saying that first rate hike probably occurs in September. Euro dollar, we're back against 111.50. I'll put up a 6-month chart. You can see it's been a dramatic move over that period. I still think we're going below parity. Jamie McGeever, little wonder the euro is down so sharply. He tweeted 10-year US-German yield spreads 20 basis points wider in just 2 days. And this is the point I was making about how the currencies have become very correlated to bond yields, in particular the euro and the German Bund future. Euro, when he tweeted this was 24 hours ago, it's rebounding a little bit, was down 3.3% on the week, heading for its biggest weekly loss since November 2011. And then again, Jamie, core values, this is referring to the comments that were made by the ECB members. Some people weren't happy that he made those comments in a private capacity the night before they were actually published. Euro falls further, now below 111. And off almost 3 cents. So I think we're recovering a little bit of that loss and the perception that the rate hike in the US is not going to be so immediate. Liberty's Malone starts pursuit of Vodafone Big Banana Prize. John Malone's comparison of potential merger partner Vodafone Group PLC to a big banana in the jar is one of the more interesting images used in the world of high-stakes deal making. You know, of course, he's got the Vodafone CEO in his sort of line of sight, and I interviewed him actually a while back. Very charming gentleman. Gold, we're now at 12.1092. I still think I'm bearish gold for the rest of the year. In fact, crude oil now trading at around 59.20. I think we're going to go to 50. Today and tomorrow we might rally, but I think we're going to go to 50 before we go to 67. That's putting my neck on the line. The Burundian president has appealed for ethnic harmony. A soldier has been killed. Pierre Nkurunziza appealed for ethnic harmony on Wednesday, addressing fears that weeks of political unrest could trigger another bout of bloodletting between Hutus and Tutsis in the heart of Africa's Great Lakes. In an address on national television, Nkurunziza, who is under pressure from street protesters to end his bid for a third term, said the risk of the former Belgian colony descending once again into genocide or civil war was too great. No Burundian wants to revive the tensions of ethnic division or any other nature. Nkurunziza, who has mixed Hutu-Tutsi parentage, said, "The blood that was spilt in the past has taught us a lesson. More than 20 people have been killed in the unrest. Few signs so far of the struggle being driven by anything other than the desire of urban Burundians to stop Nkurunziza seeking another term. The situation is so unstable and volatile that every day appears to be a flashpoint," said Karina Tetsakian, Human Rights Watch senior Burundi researcher. The demonstrators are not backing down and the government is intensifying its crackdown, she said. On Wednesday, a soldier was shot dead on the streets of the capital, with witnesses saying he'd been hit in the chest by a round fired by police, an incident that could inflame tensions between different wings of the armed security forces. Peter Martel tweeted, "Burundi protesters clash with police as president delays polls." Put up that image. So it remains very fragile, and I think it's a bit of a tinderbox. Amid yachts of rich elite, Angola's poor crushed by oil price drop. A halving of oil prices last year has increased hardship in Angola. Angola's government relies on oil sales for 95% of foreign exchange revenues, slashed a third off its budget. Dos Santos' government ended petrol subsidies last month to release the burden on the treasury, a move supported by economists but resented by the poor. Central bank also restricted dollar sales as foreign exchange supplies dried up and can't get issued with a credit card, for example. A sharp decline in the Kwanza. The Kwanza is trading at 170 against the dollar on the street compared to 109 officially. The government treats us like dogs, said Claude Ambrosio, 29, swatting flies swarming around the dried fish cells at a rundown market in Vienna. The price of everything went up, but we get no help. There are no schools, no hospitals, and you can see how we live. Annual growth in Africa's third largest economy has averaged around 10%. Country rebuilt after a 27-year civil war. IMF predicts growth will fall to 4.5% this year, 3.9% in 2016. I'll also put up a photograph I found from Only Africa Facts of Luanda. And then another photo that the ANC feed tweeted, which is President Zuma attending the ICGLR summit in Luanda, and you can see all many presidents, African presidents, in that photograph. I couldn't resist this sentence. While SPAR is forecasting continued pressure on consumer spending in South Africa, the Irish retail market continues to show encouraging signs of recovery. And this is South African SPAR, which is both in South Africa and in Ireland. And the comparison is interesting, isn't it, that Ireland has made that recovery. It was once deep in the doldrums. You'll remember South African All Share is the best performing stock index in Africa at the moment, up 10.78%. 1.806% below a record high reached on April the 24th. Dollar Rand, last trading when I checked, 11.83. Egyptian Pound, 7.63. Egyptian stock market, up 0.11% year to date, but up 6.85% since the 17th of May. Nigerian All Share is up 2.67% so far this year, but up 25.187%. since closing at a 2015 low on February the 13th, 2015. Ghana Stock Exchange up 3.2% year to date. Zambia's kwacha firmed by more than 1% against the dollar to 7.085 on Wednesday, its strongest level since March the 10th. And of course, they bit the bullet. They've started to making some changes, policy-making changes, and you can see the response is in the kwacha. Coming to Kenya, Maplecroft Risk identified 12 capital cities around the world as facing an extreme risk of terror attacks, including Nairobi in Kenya and Lagos in Nigeria. And we've already touched on that. South Africa's Tiger brand says executives manipulated numbers of its Kenya unit. Executives of the Kenya unit of Haka Industries had manipulated numbers to reach targets, irregularities that led to civil charges against Hako's managing director. Tiger brands that both external and internal auditors failed to pick up the irregularities, and that several executives at Hako have been dismissed for misconduct. There were key executives right at the top. It was difficult to pick this up. Francis Whitehash tweeted Hako profit figures were cooked and put up a photograph of the Hako senior management. Kenya shilling just below 97, and it's really key that we hold in here. And I read that piece, the Central Bank of Kenya in a delicate position over the shilling. My biggest concern remains that a move above 100 will be a catalyst for massive hedging, and that will prove a tsunami for the shilling to the downside. Nairobi All Share edged 0.27% lower yesterday. It's up 2.756% in 2015, but has corrected 5.706% off a record reached on the 25th of February. NSE 20 is up 3.677%, down 3.677%, and it is at a low reached on December the 23rd. So it's at a 2015 low. Zainab Daham, we follow each other on Twitter, I think she's from Mombasa but lives in Dubai, tweeted a stone tool in Kenya which dates to 3.3 million years ago is among the oldest discovered. And then she's referring it to a New York Times article. Our hominin ancestors were making stone tools 3.3 million years ago, some 700,000 years earlier than previously thought. What the sharp blades were used for is not yet known, nor is the identity of the tool makers. No bone fossils have been found at the discovery site, but in all likelihood, Dr. Hammond and Dr. Lewis said the tools were produced by a more primitive member of the human family well before the appearance of the genus Homo. The earliest known Homo sapiens, Homo specimen, announced more than 2 months ago, lived 2.8 million years ago in what is now Ethiopia. The earliest previous evidence of tool making, also from Ethiopia, was dated 2.6 million years ago. Of course, I went to visit Oligasai. There's these incredible stone hand axes. I don't know what period they come from. I must go and check. And if you go down to see those stone hand axes in Oligasai, and you go further on, you get to the hot springs of Lake Magadi. Well worth a visit. Kenya is enticing investors with $600 million sugar debt write-offs. They've written everything off, and they're trying to find buyers to step in. That should be interesting. Once again, thank you for stopping by.